Have you noticed how the word alimony instantly changes the tone of a conversation? People lean forward, voices rise, someone inevitably says, "Why should a man pay after divorce?" Another says, "Women marry for money anyway." And just like that, an entire legal framework is reduced to suspicion, resentment, and stereotypes. But alimony was never meant to be a moral judgment. It was never meant to be a prize or a punishment. It was meant to answer one quiet but crucial question: what happens when a marriage ends and one person is left economically stranded? That's the question we are really avoiding, and that's the question we need to confront. Alimony is not a jackpot, it is not guaranteed, and certainly not easy to obtain. What it is instead is a legal acknowledgement of economic imbalance created during marriage. So, if we are going to have opinions about alimony, and we all seem to, then we owe ourselves a more honest conversation about labor, sacrifice, and fairness. Hello and welcome back to the Personal Lens, where we explore the political through the personal. And today we are talking about alimony not as a slogan, not as a gender war, but as a social reality. Alimony has become one of the most misunderstood legal concepts of our time, reduced to memes, courtroom gossip, and bitter social media rants. And somewhere along the way, we stopped asking what it actually is, why it exists, and what problem it was meant to solve. So let's pause. Let's slow down the noise, step away from the anger, and actually ask, what is alimony? Why does it exist? Who does it protect? And why does it trigger so much resentment, especially when women claim it? Because alimony is not just a legal provision, it's a mirror reflecting how we value women's labor, sacrifice, and economic vulnerability. Alimony is financial support paid by one spouse to another after separation or divorce. Spouse. It is not a reward. It is not revenge. It is definitely not a lottery prize. It is a legal mechanism designed to prevent financial destitution after the breakdown of a marriage. In simple terms, alimony exists because marriage is not just an emotional relationship. It is an economic partnership too. And when that partnership ends, the law asks a basic question: who paid the price for this arrangement and who walked away with economic stability? Why this conversation is so gendered? In theory, alimony is gender neutral. In practice, however, women are the primary recipients, not because courts are biased, but because society is. And let's look at the reality. Women are far more likely to leave the workforce after marriage. Women disproportionately perform unpaid domestic and caregiving labor, even if they work outside. Women sacrifice career growth, income, promotions, and financial independence. Women often relocate, adjust, and compromise economically and socially. Marriage for many women is not just companionship, it is career interruption. And divorce for many women is not just emotional loss, it is economic freefall. So now let's talk about the unpaid labor nobody wants to count. If cooking, cleaning, childcare, elder care, emotional management, and household coordination were paid jobs, what would their salary be? Economists estimate that unpaid domestic labor contributes up to one-third of a nation's GDP, yet remains invisible. And this labor is overwhelmingly performed by women. So when someone says she didn't work, why should she get alimony? What they are really saying is labor only counts if a man would do it or if a market prices it. Alimony exists precisely to recognize unpaid labor that made the other spouse's paid work possible. So, why should a man pay after divorce? This question is asked often, loudly, accusingly, but rarely is the reverse question asked. Why was a woman expected to sacrifice and put in unpaid labor during marriage without compensation? Alimony is not about punishing men, it is about acknowledging the economic imbalance created during marriage. When one spouse advances because the other stepped back, the benefits and the costs cannot be erased by divorce papers. And now let's talk about choice, the word everyone misuses. But she chose to stay at home. Did she? Or was she socialized to believe that? Good wives adjust, good mothers sacrifice, ambition is selfish, career can wait, family comes first. Choice doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within patriarchy, expectation, pressure, and limited alternatives. Alimony exists because the law understands, but society often pretends not to see, that many choices are structurally enforced roles. Now let's bust the myth of the gold digger. And this is perhaps the most persistent misogynist narrative. Women marry for alimony. Let's dismantle it calmly. Alimony cases take years, period. Litigation is emotionally exhausting. Amounts awarded are often modest, temporary, and conditional. Courts consider income, age, employability, health, and duration of marriage. There is no jackpot, there is no shortcut, there is no luxury. Alimony is about survival, not enrichment. No one plans their life around legal proceedings that strip privacy, dignity, and peace. And what do courts actually look at? Contrary to popular belief, courts do not blindly side with women. Indian courts examine income and earning capacity of both spouses, duration of marriage, standard of living during marriage, age and health, responsibilities such as children or dependent parents, possibility of self support. Alimony is often rehabilitative, not permanent. It exists to help a spouse rebuild life, not avoid work. Can men get alimony? Yes, and they do. When men are economically dependent, disabled, elderly, or primary caregivers, courts have awarded maintenance. But here's the uncomfortable truth: patriarchy discourages men from admitting dependence. So fewer men claim it, not because the law forbids it, but because masculinity shames vulnerability. This is not a woman's privilege, it's a gendered consequence of unequal social roles. And while some argue that alimony contradicts gender equality, but equality does not mean treating unequal situations as equal. True equality recognizes context, power, and disadvantage. And until domestic labor is shared equally, caregiving responsibilities are balanced, career sacrifices are mutual, economic dependency disappears, alimony remains necessary, not as charity but as corrective justice. So, what alimony is really about? At its core, alimony asks a moral question. Should one person walk away economically unscathed from a partnership that depended on the other's unpaid labor? The law answers no, because marriage is not just love. It is labor, it is compromise, it is economic interdependence, and when that ends, fairness must step in. Alimony does not destroy families. It does not reward laziness. It does not target men. It simply recognizes a truth we are uncomfortable admitting. Women have paid for marriage with invisible labor for generations. Alimony is not a feminist weapon. It is a social safety net created because equality has not yet arrived. And perhaps the real question is not why does alimony exist, but rather why do we still need it? But maybe the discomfort around alimony isn't really about money. Maybe it's about recognition that love often comes with labor, that marriage has beneficiaries and bearers, that some sacrifices don't come with pay slips but still cost a lifetime. Alimony asks us to confront an uncomfortable truth that for generations women have paid into marriages in ways the economy never counted until the relationship ended. And perhaps that is why the idea unsettles us. Because alimony forces us to acknowledge that equality cannot exist where unpaid sacrifice is expected, normalized, and then forgotten. Alimony does not ask for sympathy, it asks for fairness. And until marriage stops being a site of unequal cost, alimony remains not a privilege but a reminder that justice often begins where denial ends. Alimony is not a scam, it is the bill patriarchy refuses to acknowledge. It is the cost of a system that thrives on invisible labor. It is unpaid labor finally being named. You cannot consume unpaid labor for years and then call accountability extortion. You cannot build stability on someone else's sacrifice and then call fairness greed. You cannot benefit from sacrifice and then resent accountability. And until care, sacrifice, and dependency stops being gendered, alimony will remain not as an exception but a necessary correction. Definitely not a favor but a reckoning. Marriage created dependency. Marriage created an economic reality. Divorce does not undo it. Marriage is personal, but its consequences are political, and alimony exists because equality still doesn't. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. This is Jayanti signing off for now, but we will be back with more on the personal lens. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this. Share your thoughts at the email given in the description. And until then, stay critical, stay curious, and keep dissenting. But most importantly, keep looking through the personal lens.